While it's true that Fannin County held far fewer slaves than the plantations in deep South Texas, there were certain individuals who set up shop on the southern side of the Red River Valley. They came from other states where the institution of slavery was a way of life and generally accepted socially, politically, and otherwise. Here we will look at some of the most successful empires created using slavery and the families that gained prominence because of it. We begin our journey with a look at Richard R. Beal, who moved from Williamson, Tennessee to Fannin County, Texas in the spring of 1835, seeking land and opportunity. He settled north of Lanius and married Matilda Clift Murphy, the widow of Enos Murphy, who passed in 1837. Within a year, Richard and Matilda celebrated the birth of their son, James Edward Beal, in 1838, and worked on establishing their farm, which was said to be located northwest of the Riverby store in the early 1840s. Matilda died in 1842, and Richard would wed a second wife, Jane Black, July 1, 1843, the daughter of pioneer Jacob Black. James patented 1/3 of a league of land, receiving a first-class land grant in February of 1845. In 1850, Richard reported having a personal worth $8,988, holding 2,796 acres of land, 300 of that cultivated and producing 5,000 bushels of Indian corn. Of his holdings, he reported livestock with a value of $5,970, including owning 42 horses, 23 mules, 200 cows, 18 oxen, 140 sheep, 1,500 swine, and 37 slaves. Richard's health had declined, and within 10 years, the dawn of his life was fast approaching. A will filed in Fannin County July 4, 1853, left everything to his brother John, appointing him as trustee and guardian of his son James, who would be provided for through the estate after reaching the age of 21. Unfortunately for James, he passed away on September 28, 1853, at the age of 15, and his uncle John inherited the entire estate. He was buried near Riverby on the banks of the Red River. It is not clear what became of his wife Jane. Richard passed away in 1854 and was thought to be buried near his son James and former wife Matilda at the Beal Cemetery. Alfred Elkins Pace was born June 29, 1811 in Warren County, Kentucky, to Twitty and Susanna Duncan Pace. Both he and his brother John wound up in Fannin County before 1850, and John held 20 slaves at his farm compared to older brother Alfred, who only held 1 slave at that time. However, within 10 years, Alfred would add greatly to his slave holdings, having 29 slaves by 1860. The increase in net worth between 1850 and 1860 broadcasts the profitability of using mostly free labor. In 1850, Alfred claimed just $1,100 in personal and real estate. Yet by 1860, he increased his net worth drastically, reporting $40,000 in his personal estate and $18,000 in real estate. Alfred married 17-year-old Elizabeth Sophronia Hardaway of Sevier, Arkansas on May 25, 1851. He and his wife had 5 children between 1852 and 1860. Alfred served as a member of the Texas House of Representatives from the 4th District in 1849. Alfred was well respected by Bonham citizens as a representative and a merchant. In later years, he turned to farming and built a very successful agricultural operation. He was held in high esteem for his public works and devotion to advancing the education of others. At 51, Alfred served as Brigadier General of the Texas State Troops beginning in March of 1862. As with many, the war years took their toll, and Alfred passed away on January 20, 1868 in Bonham at the age of 56, with burial at the Willow Wild Cemetery. Zachariah B. Sims, who was born January 10, 1811 in Abbeville, South Carolina, led an interesting life. No one seems to know who his parents were. Perhaps he was planted here by the aliens. He was a man of high moral character with an analytical mind. A merchant and farmer by trade, he strived to achieve prominence as a businessman, builder, and inventor. He was a staunch Baptist and lived a Christian life, seeking to support education for all, and led by example. He met and married Mary Abercrombie in 1834, and together they had 4 children. Van died in 1863 while serving in the Confederate Army. Laura married John T.R. Jewett and passed away on November 1, 1869 at the home of her father. Cynthia married B.E. Brown, and after his death, she resided in her father's home only to see her sister, mother, father, and husband all pass away in the very same house she called home. Sims arrived in Texas from Alabama around 1854 and promptly purchased land and developed a large plantation just south of the Red River, some 18 miles northeast of Bonham. He built a grand home in Bonham and conducted his retail business there, eventually selling it to Hampton and Harris in 1859. Sims had the ability to see a problem, analyze it, envision, and build a solution. He developed labor-saving implements and machinery to improve his farm production. After emancipation, mechanization had to be achieved to offset increased labor costs. Here are a few of his patented ideas between 1969 and 1876. There are several entries in the Fannin County deed book which lists slave transactions with Zachariah Sims. One which I found to be most interesting is that of a girl, Sarah, age 17, and her infant daughter sold to Daniel Webster Lee, February 10, 1861. Sims also sold 2 young men, Wesley, age 22, and Moses, age 12, to James W. Goss by promissory note. On February 7, 1861, Sims sold 12-year-old Sarah to C.C. Alexander, another slave-holding family in the area, the Alexanders holding 22 slaves between them. While Zachariah had vested interests in businesses beyond the plantation, it's obvious that his slave holdings didn't add burdens to his bottom line. When in Talladega, Alabama in 1850, his holdings amounted to $9,000. By 1860, he reported $17,000 in real estate and $17,500 in his personal estate. In the final 4 years of his life, Sims had filed a will leaving everything to his surviving daughter, Cynthia M. Eliza Brown, and appointed her husband, B. Evans Brown, executor. After this, he reported his 1870 worth at just $1,000. And though he spent his remaining days being imaginative and filing patents, he would pass at the age of 63 on September 4, 1878, at his home in Bonham. He was buried beside his wife and daughter at the Bailey English Cemetery. Stephen Decatur Rainey was born in Georgia and immigrated to Texas in March of 1837 at Bowie County, where he remained that first year. He was the son of Josiah and Elizabeth Decatur Dupree Rainey. He received a headright of 640 acres after Texas won its independence from Mexico. In 1847, he married Mary Jane Russell, the daughter of James W. Russell and Nancy Johnston Russell. Stephen moved to Fannin County before 1850 and reported holding $5,000 in real estate as a farmer, along with his wife Mary Jane and children, Stephen Dupree Rainey and James Wright Rainey. Sister Lucy Alice Rainey would be born the following year. In 1851, he and his father-in-law James W. Russell and brother-in-law Colonel John Rogers Russell partnered with each other to create a dry goods trade in Clarksville. On December 29, 1855, Rainey patented 2,605 acres in Cook County, and on February 4, 1856, Rainey was named to the board of directors for the Memphis, El Paso, and Pacific Railroad Company. But Rainey's wealth accumulation came from his farming operations, where he employed slave labor to his benefit. By 1860, he claimed $12,000 in real estate and $40,000 in his personal estate. Between the land he owned and the 42 slaves he held, His family was reaping the bounty of the enterprise. Stephen served as captain in the 1st Cavalry Battalion of the Texas State Troops for the Confederacy during the war. By 1870, he had moved his family to Jefferson, and finally to Marshall and Harrison County by 1880. On August 8, 1891, Stephen passed away there in Marshall with burial in the Marshall Cemetery. The Smith plantation of Fannin County has a colorful background story, one which was all too common for the times they lived in. As Mary Chestnut, a Civil War diarist, put it,
"Ours is a monstrous system. Any lady is all too ready to tell you who the father of all the mulatto children in every household but her own. Those, she seems to think, dropped from the cloud."
The power over the enslaved by their masters extended well beyond the field. It extended beyond his own marriage. Sexual relations between slaves and their masters often resulted in mixed offspring, referred to as mulattoes, were still considered to be property of their masters. This is the story of Nathan Alexander Smith of Alabama, a powerful slave owner of the time. In 1815, a child was born to Nathan and his wife Frances Virginia Martin Smith, which they named Gideon. And as the story goes, while this child was still very young, another child, Sam, was born to Beulah, a slave mistress. There being only a few years between them, the boys grew up together, played together as friends, the secret affair never coming to light during their developing years. Nathan Smith moved his family and their slaves to Woodlawn, Texas, about halfway between Jefferson and Marshall. And by the early 1850s, they had moved to Fannin County. Gideon, now 36, was trying to establish his own destiny, sought to emulate his father by establishing his own plantation. In the early 1850s, Nathan and son Gideon had purchased 3,000 acres of rich farmland south of the Red River near Mulberry and Ravenna. With the move from Woodlawn to Fannin County, he had been given Sam to use as his lead slave, Sam still unaware of any familiar connection. In 1830, Madison, Alabama, Nathan reported owning 18 slaves. In 1840, Pickens, Alabama, Nathan reported owning 57 slaves. In 1850, Nathan reported a real estate value of $3,040. By 1860, Nathan, now living in Woodlawn, Texas, reported over 60 slaves with a real estate value of $1,800 and a personal estate worth $56,000. By 1853, Gideon had access to thousands of acres of land and roughly 30 slaves for his use. He was well on his way to making a name for himself. Possibly, because of this change, the truth came out about the affair between his father and Beulah. It is not known how. One story told that the truth came out after the death of Nathan in 1853, but that doesn't wash because Nathan didn't pass until 1863 in Woodlawn, Texas, with burial there. However, the truth came out. It explained some things for Gideon. When he realized that Sam was in fact his half-brother, Gideon began treating his lead slave as more of an equal, though he still reported Sam on the tax rolls as his property. Once his brother John C. Smith arrived in 1855, Gideon turned over half of his land to him. Though John developed his own farm, he sought an education in medicine and became a doctor, treating patients over the entire area whether they could pay or not. Dr. John C. Smith went on to have a very successful career in medicine. Once the war began, Gideon volunteered and worked to achieve the rank of colonel in the Texas 9th Cavalry. After the Civil War was over, Sam continued working at the plantation after emancipation, possibly working as a sharecropper, taking the last name of his owner, Smith, which was a common practice at the time. His son, Samuel Smith Jr., was able to buy 100 acres of the old Smith plantation for the token price of $1, and there his extended family remained for many generations. It is said that there is a section of land of the former Smith plantation which has continuously been in farm production since the 1850s. A new era developed after emancipation in northern Fannin County. Farm and ranch operations flourished by two men around Monkstown. They were George William Morgan and Joseph Ray Goss. For more than 50 years, the Morgan and Goss families were neighbors. At Riverby, a school was established in 1913 for the children of the Goss and Morgan plantations, at one time serving 200 students. We begin the new age here with the Morgan plantation. Unlike the plantations of the past, these large farming operations were on a whole new level, created by naturally brilliant men with strong business skills. While the days of slave labor was gone, virtually the same existed here for another 50 years. Workers of these modern operations still worked dusk to dawn and were paid with commissary notes. Basically, plantation dollars only spendable at the plantation owner's store. And I'm sure the transactions heavily favored the house. In other words, these workers were not building a future for themselves. They were simply surviving. Morgan owned 12,000 acres, which covered all the land where Monkstown was born. For 50 years, his operation employed hundreds of families, and many area businesses prospered from interactions with the operation. George William Morgan was born October 14, 1875, in Paris, Texas, to Rufus B. Morgan and Mary Isabella Buster Morgan. He married Mattie Lightfoot Morgan of Missouri on February 27, 1873, in Lamar County, Texas. For whatever reason, the Morgans never had a family of their own. The Morgan plantation eventually would become the Riverby Ranch. Will retired and moved to Paris, Texas in 1955. He had been a practicing attorney in Honey Grove, a large cotton plantation owner at Riverby, a lifelong Methodist and Mason. He passed away 3 years later, May 19, 1958, and Mattie died 8 years later, February 25, 1966, with burial for both in unmarked graves at the Evergreen Cemetery in Paris, Texas. Joseph Ray Goss was born in Birmingham, Alabama, March 1, 1870, to Dr. J. Fletcher and Frances Jane Ray Goss. He found himself at age 7, with his family moving to Fannin County, Texas, just south of Red River. He and his 8 siblings grew up in the area that would become Monkstown. By the age of 15, Joe would forego education and take to farming like his father. In 1885, with help from his father, he acquired 50 acres of rich Red River bottom soil, which was fertile and perfect for growing cotton. And as it happens, the timing of this event couldn't have been better, as after-war prices for cotton were sailing through the roof. His first crop was a success, and his career in agriculture would only rise from there. Joe built a business and community out of his endeavors, a place that became known as the Goss Plantation. It was self-sufficient in every way, from growing crops to feed the workers and livestock, to the storing of seed for the following year's planting. His organization, leadership, and skills elevated his business into a dynasty, with production of cotton well above most former plantation operations. There were quarters for the hundreds of people who worked there, most of those driving teams of mules planting cotton seed from dusk until dawn. But Joe also made money on the back end by selling supplies like staple foods and clothing to his laborers. His operation had men specifically on site to repair any breakdowns should they occur, and blacksmiths constantly at work shoeing mules and horses, sharpening farm tools, and repairing wagons and other equipment. Wages were paid by the day in script, and cotton was harvested and sold at Honey Grove. At its height, the Goss plantation was 16,000 acres, with 4,000 acres of those lying across the Red River to the north. The operation could easily produce 3,000 bales of cotton annually, some years better than others, of course. His son, Samuel Edwin Goss, became his right-hand man and helped to run the Goss plantation. Running 350 mule teams required about 1,000 men. Joe had married Fanny Markham on August 23, 1896, in Bonham, Texas, and together they had 8 children. But at the age of 38, Fanny died on May 28, 1918, and was buried at the Oakwood Cemetery in Honey Grove, Texas. Joe died on March 1, 1947, and was buried beside his wife, Fanny. After Joe's death, his sons operated the farm as a cattle ranch and alfalfa farm for many years.
Thanks for watching, and remember to like and subscribe.